Hi everyone, it's David here from Pugilist.tech. Today we're doing a build video. What we're looking at today is a build with our card box. The card box is unique. It is made of cardboard, as in the name. And this card box is really designed for people who either are looking to get into hitboxes specifically, so maybe they have a fight stick already, or it's people who are interested in moving beyond the controller or pad and looking to get into the other side of fighting games on the controller side and want a more affordable way to trial over the long term. So what today we'll do is we'll walk through how the box works, how the build works, and also some sort of tips and tricks, and we'll talk a little bit about the product. So here we go. So as you can see here, we've got a range of products outlined. You'll be able to find out what all these products are in our blog. We have build lists available on our website. This is in a blog format. So you can see here now I'm starting to push the buttons in. There's nothing to this. You just line the buttons up and press down. So you can see that there are two spots on the side, and we've also got a range of places on the top as well. You can configure this in any way you like. In this particular video, I've gone for a green and white build with a bit of a white stripe cutting that green action button side, and that's on the right hand side as the player looks at it, or in this particular video obviously we're looking at it from the rear and top. So they're all plugged in now. What I'm going to do now is get the USB mount. So I'm putting a bit of blue tack here because normally in a normal enclosure you would screw this into the enclosure itself, but because we're dealing with cardboard we can't do that. So now we're putting a bit of blue tack around the edge of the mounting border, and then once that's done I'm going to put it inside the enclosure, and we'll start to sort of reinforce it a little bit. So there you go, that's me putting it in. I'm putting it in relatively lightly, waiting to open the enclosure and then pressing down on both sides. Remembering this is cardboard, so we always want to make sure that we're sort of reinforcing if we're pushing any significant pressure down, that we're applying both sides. Now, as you'll see, I'm putting a little bit of blue tack now on the rear side as well. That's just to reinforce from both front and rear with blue tack, and that will keep it nice and solid in there. So this mounting point is really important. It's designed as an interface. It's, to play this, you need to have a cable connected to the controller, from the controller to your console or PC. And in this case, these mounts, what they do is they allow you to easily plug in and out a cable. So now we're looking at some of the internal cables. So this is internal wiring. So I've just taken out a hitbox cable from Brooks. What this does is allow you to plug it into a Buttonbox. So I put that to the side, and now I'm going to open up the second packet here. So this is the primary cable. That first one was about, I guess that's a conversion cable for button boxes. Now we're pulling out the actual main wiring harness. Now I'm going to put one away, the secondary one, and then we've got the primary one. You can tell the primary one, it's much bigger, and much longer, and has a lot more weight to it. Plus it has a 20-pin connector on it, so you'll be able to see that very easily. Okay, so I'm just now unraveling it a little bit, and I'll be showing that to the camera in a second. So what I'm doing here is I'm just bending it. You can see that it's just on the edge of the camera view, but you can see that I'm bending it here. The idea is that when it's inside the box, obviously that wiring harness stands up quite a lot, and you can see it on the right of the video there that it had an L-shaped kink to it. That's what you want to achieve. So the PCB, this one is a 0 pi easy. That's now, I've placed that inside the box. What I'm doing here now is I'm pulling up the guide. So you can find that on Brook website, and the guide gives you effectively a schematic of the PCB. Don't be scared about that. It's actually all written very simply. And then once you get that guide, you'll be able to see where the pins are, and that's what you really want. You just want to know what wire does what. And we'll make sure that we put some of those guides on our website over time as well, but you can always get them straight from the Brook website. Now, when you buy a product from us, you'll know what your product is, and you can just type in Brook and your type of product. That should come up. The second or third link should be the right Brook page, and then you can go in and all you got to do is pick user guide. So you can see here I'm holding up for the camera. You can see a diagram of a 20-pin connector on my phone. You can see me touching the 20-pin connector on the PCB, and then in my other hand, you can actually see I have the actual 20-pin cable. So I've got the PCB, I've got the cable, and I've got the guide in front of me, which tells me what pins do what. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to connect up the PCB. And once that's connected up, I'm going to start separating out some of the wires and making sure that I plug them into the right buttons. So this is probably the more complicated part of it. Finding out exactly what wire does what can be sometimes difficult, but it's really just about persistence. You've just got to work out which wire does what and connect it to the right button. And it's just the best way to do that is just to follow the guide and to trace the wires as you go. You look at the 20-pin connector and you go, okay, third from top as an example is red. Okay, I've got to find the red wire, and I'm gonna trace that red wire to its end point, and then you plug it in, and you just do that each time, and you'll eventually come to the point where you'll have it all plugged in. Now, a little tip for people who haven't done this before: when you plug buttons in, not only usually what's happened is that it is both inverted and upside down. And that really confuses people sometimes because you're plugging into the bottom, not the top. But from your end, you think about those buttons when they're on the top. It's really important that you orientate yourself in your head about exactly where the buttons are. So in particular, I'm putting the action buttons here. So I'm putting the direction buttons here. So they're the buttons that do left, right, up, down. I'm plugging those in. They're one of the easier buttons to deal with. But what we're really looking at now is slowly but surely working out where all of our other ones. So every button has two wires that go into it. It is effectively a ground and a positive. You don't have to, as long as each button has a ground and a positive, that's fine. You don't have to have a specific ground for each button. You just have to think about the positives. And it doesn't need to go on any particular prong. So the prong is a piece of metal that you put the wire into. You don't have to have a specific one. It doesn't need to be the left one or the right one. Ultimately, you're creating what's called a circuit, and the button, when depressed, creates the circuit, and when it's not depressed, it breaks the circuit. So it actually doesn't matter whether it's the left or the right, and that doesn't matter from button to button either. Some buttons can be one way, some buttons can be the other. When I do a build, I always have the grounds on one side and all the positives on the other, but that's purely aesthetic. So here I'm connecting up some of the what's called a miscellaneous button. So they're things like start, select, PlayStation if you're running a PlayStation. So, these buttons, we've got two of them on this controller, so you've just got to be really careful. My advice is to use start and menu, are the two buttons, because you've only got two on this particular box. So here, I'm also putting in some ground. You can see there that I've unclipped the ground. That's because it was a bit of a stretch, so I'm actually going to leave that for the moment. I'm going to pick a different ground. Like I said, it doesn't actually matter which ground you use, so I'll use a different ground cable later on in the video. Okay, so this is where I'm starting to separate things out. I've just shown you two separated cables. So effectively we've got two sets of cables. One, if you can imagine a regular fight stick has 8 buttons, effectively one set of these two cables, each one has 4 wires in it. One is the set from above and the other is the set from below. So that's, I guess, helps you out. You'll also notice the different lengths. So once you work out which one is supposed to go on the upper or lower, it's really just putting in the shortest one on the most inside button and the longest one on the most outside button, and the corresponding cables therein. So they've actually set up the wiring harness. Again, that's what this wire is called. It's called a harness. They've actually set up the wiring harness in a really logical way so that you kind of know which wire goes where. So that really helps you out. And you can see I'm moving quite quickly here because I've worked out where I'm supposed to, which 4 wire is going on the top or bottom. And because it's shortest first and then all the way up to longest, you can see there I can just compare 2 wires. Then what I'm doing now is it becomes really quickly in plugging them in. So the key is just getting that first wire, knowing exactly where that goes, and then from there it's relatively easy to plug it all in. So you can move quite quickly at that point. So you can see there's little bits and pieces here that are helping you as you do the build, and once you work out those little indicators, then the whole build itself becomes a lot easier to do. So we're getting towards the end point of this build. The wiring harness is the hardest bit, and now that's all being connected up. So now what we're going to do is try and package it all in. Oh no, apologies. We've just got to do the grounds on those last couple of buttons. So what I'll do is I'll just plug those in. I'm using one for that button that I took one off earlier because there was a bit of a stretch, and then I'll just do the remaining buttons. So that will happen pretty quickly. You can see there that there's a single wire with a lot of clips on it, and it's black. That's designating that it's the ground, and then I'm just doing them one after the other. So you'll notice that I'm actually doing them. I'm doing them each button next to each other. That's because that allows you to, I guess, more effectively spread the length of the cable. And we're just coming to the last 2 buttons now. And then once that's complete, what we'll do is try and start packaging this all together. So there's a lot of buttons, there's a lot of wires, and there's not a lot of box. So packing it all together is that next challenge that we have. So what I've done now is that I'm prepping the buttons. What that means is that I'm bending each of the prongs left or right. The reason I'm doing this is because, again, we have some space constraints in the box. So what's really important is that we bend the prongs, and then by bending the prongs, we can then reduce how much vertical space it takes up in the box, and allows it to compress a bit more nicely. So with this, just hold the base of the button, and then gently push on it, and you'll find that it bends relatively easily. Okay, so I'm just folding it over now. I think my first attempt at folding it over wasn't super successful, so you'll see me sort of looking at a few things, sizing it up, just getting that box nice and tidy, and then I'll be testing and adjusting. This is important. What you don't want to do is just go through the steps mechanically. You want to make sure that you're going through the whole build. Okay, so what I'm doing here now is putting in the feet. These feet are little plastic feet, and what they do is they have some sticky on them on one side, and then they have a plastic pin on the other that clips in to the PCB. And then with that you can take the sticky off and then place it into the box itself. So now I'm just going to take a quick look at it, work out exactly where I'm going to put it based on how I've done it. I've decided on that back corner closest to me. So I'm taking these sticky feet off. They come off pretty easily, and then very quickly you'll be able to stick it down and move on to the next part of it. So again, this is all part of that packaging component. Now everything's plugged in. It's all about packaging it back in and getting that working and looking. So I'm going to swizzle that round in a second. There we go. And you can see that I've put it in the back corner and I've sort of pressed it down. So I've now got this called what we call the super short. One goes into the USB mount, and then the other goes in the PCB. And then by doing that, we've connected the PCB and all the buttons to the exterior of the box, because now we can plug something in on the outside. So I'm just here adjusting some of those pins, pushing them down a little bit further. I've decided at this point that they might just need to be a little bit more pushed down, giving me a little bit more space in the box itself. So now with everything plugged in, this will work. So now we're getting right to the back end of this build, and we're just pushing things down and getting cables tidied away, lining things up, and slowly but surely just working it in. And there we go. So what you can see there is I'm sort of pressing it down because the wires are putting pressure upwards on the lid. This is a good thing. This gives, because remember this is a cardboard box, so now that there's pressure on it, that means it gives it more support internally. I do want to just make it a little bit tidier, so I'm just going to push a few things left and right, and just tidy a couple of things up as I see it. You can see a couple of little pins. I'm going to just push a little bit further, just tightening the whole package up a little bit. This is all just test and adjust, and that's what's really important with this box. Being cardboard, you just need to ease it in and adjust things as you go. So I'll finish that up and then close the box. And there we go, we just test and adjust, push everything down a little bit, and then that is now done. So that box is complete. The springiness and the body of wires inside are providing some support to the lid. And here I'm just demonstrating how we plug a cable into the outside. Obviously your cable will be longer than that. That's just a spare short cable, but it demonstrates that you can plug it in the outside. And there I've just touched the menu buttons and start button, and it's complete. That is now the Cardbox, all ready to play, and you've made it yourself, and I think that's pretty exciting. This is all available on Pugilist.tech store. That's pugilist.tech, and I would love to see people's designs, how they've done it. If you mod it, you can put stickers on this. You can use tape on it to press it down or to reinforce it. There's a whole bunch of stuff you can do. Being cardboard on the outside, you can write on it, do art and doodles on the outside. Really excited to see what people do with it. So thank you very much for your time, and that's it.